"Look at this old fool. Probably can't even afford his coffee," sneered Tony Martinez, as he and his crew surrounded the elderly black man sitting alone in the corner booth of Murphy's Diner. The 68-year-old man kept his head down, quietly eating his meal, while the gang members made increasingly threatening comments about cleaning up the neighborhood. What these young criminals didn't know was that Captain William Big Bill Jackson had spent 32 years patrolling these same streets, and his old precinct was about to get a very urgent call about trouble at their captain's favorite diner. If you believe that respect is earned through service, and that true authority comes from protecting communities, hit that subscribe button right now, and tell us where you're watching from, because the story will show you what happens when street thugs pick the wrong target. Murphy's Diner had been a fixture in the Riverside neighborhood for over 40 years. The red vinyl booths were cracked with age, the checkered linoleum floor showed decades of wear, and the coffee was strong enough to wake the dead. But for Captain William Big Bill Jackson, this place represented something more important than good food. It was the heart of the community he had served and protected for over 3 decades. At T68, Captain Jackson cut an imposing figure in retirement. 6 feet 4 inches tall with broad shoulders that spoke of years of physical conditioning, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had faced down dangerous criminals throughout his career. His graying hair was still cut in the military style he'd maintained since his army days before joining the police force, and his dark eyes held the sharp awareness that never left veteran law enforcement officers. Tonight, like every Tuesday for the past 20 years, Captain Jackson sat in his usual corner booth, working on his regular order: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, and black coffee. The booth gave him a clear view of the entire diner, and both entrances' habits developed over decades of staying alert for potential threats. But lately, those threats had been increasing. The Riverside neighborhood was changing. What had once been a stable working-class community was now showing signs of gang infiltration. Drug dealers operated more openly, vandalism was increasing, and longtime residents were beginning to feel unsafe in their own neighborhood. Captain Jackson had spent his career fighting exactly this kind of decay, but now, as a retiree on a pension, he could only watch and worry about the community he loved. That's why he wasn't entirely surprised when the trouble walked through Murphy's front door at 8:30 p.m. Tony Martinez, 24, entered first, followed by 4 other young men who carried themselves with the swagger that marked them as gang members. They wore expensive sneakers, designer clothes, and heavy gold chains that suggested their income came from sources other than legitimate employment. Martinez was the obvious leader, taller than the others, with sleeve tattoos and the kind of predatory confidence that came from years of intimidating people without consequence. Behind Martinez came his crew: Luis Loco Herrera, Miguel Santos, Carlos Rivera, and Jerome J. Dog Williams. They ranged in age from 19 to 26, all of them with arrest records for various crimes, including assault, drug possession, and robbery. They were the kind of young criminals who thrived on intimidation and violence, particularly against victims they perceived as vulnerable. Captain Jackson watched them enter with the analytical eye of someone who had been profiling potential threats for over 3 decades. Their body language, their scan of the room, their obvious search for easy targets, everything about them screamed trouble. The diner's other patrons noticed too. An elderly white couple in the front booth exchanged nervous glances and quietly asked for their check. A middle-aged woman dining alone gathered her purse closer and avoided eye contact. The teenage waitress behind the counter tensed visibly as the gang members claimed a large table in the center of the diner. Murphy's Diner had always been a safe haven for the neighborhood's residents, a place where people could eat in peace, without fear. But the arrival of Martinez and his crew changed the entire atmosphere. Conversations became quieter, people moved more carefully, and the comfortable community feeling was replaced by tension and apprehension. Martinez surveyed the diner like a predator selecting prey. His eyes passed over the nervous couples, the frightened waitress, and the few other diners who were trying to become invisible. Then his gaze settled on Captain Jackson, sitting alone in the corner booth. To Martinez, Captain Jackson looked like the perfect target. An elderly black man, dining alone, probably on a fixed income, definitely unable to fight back against 5 young, strong gang members. Here was someone they could intimidate, rob, and humiliate without any real risk to themselves. "Hey boys," Martinez said loudly enough for the entire diner to hear. "Let Grandpa over there. Bet he's got some money we could help him spend. His crew laughed and began moving toward Captain Jackson's booth. The other diners watched in horror, but no one moved to intervene. This was exactly the kind of intimidation that had been driving good people out of the neighborhood. Captain Jackson continued eating his meatloaf, but his awareness level had shifted to full tactical alert. In his decades of police work, he had learned to recognize the moment when a situation moved from potential threat to active danger. That moment had just arrived. Luis Herrera reached the booth first, sliding uninvited into the seat across from Captain Jackson. "Hey, old man. This is our booth now. You need to find somewhere else to sit." Captain Jackson looked up slowly, eating Herrera's eyes with the calm stare that had intimidated countless criminals over the years. "Son, I'm just trying to eat my dinner in peace. I suggest you do the same." The response surprised Herrera, who was used to immediate fear and compliance from his victims. This old man seemed remarkably unimpressed by gang intimidation tactics. Martinez stepped up to the table, his crew forming a semicircle behind him. "Did you just give my boy orders, old man? Because around here, we give the orders, and we're ordering you to hand over your wallet and whatever else you got in your pockets." The demand was made loudly enough for everyone in the diner to hear. This wasn't just robbery, it was a public demonstration of gang power, designed to terrorize the entire community and establish dominance over the neighborhood. Captain Jackson set down his fork and looked up at Martinez with expressions that had faced down armed drug dealers, domestic violence perpetrators, and violent criminals of every description. "Young man, I think you've made a mistake. I suggest you and your friends find another place to have your conversation." The calm authority in Captain Jackson's voice was unmistakable, but Martinez was too drunk on his own power to recognize the warning signs. In his experience, elderly victims always back down when faced with overwhelming numbers and the threat of violence. "The only mistake here is you thinking you got a choice," Martinez sneered. "See, this is our neighborhood now. We decide who gets to eat here, who gets to walk these streets, who gets to feel safe. And right now, you ain't safe, old man." Carlos Rivera decided to escalate the intimidation. He reached across the table and grabbed Captain Jackson's coffee cup, deliberately spilling the hot liquid across the table and onto Captain Jackson's meal. "Oops," Rivera said with mock innocence. "Looks like your dinner's ruined, Grandpa. Guess you'll have to leave now." The destruction of his meal crossed a line for Captain Jackson. He had been willing to defuse the situation peacefully, but these young criminals had moved beyond intimidation to property destruction and were clearly preparing for violence. Captain Jackson reached into his jacket pocket with slow, deliberate movements. Martinez tensed, expecting the old man to reach for a wallet or money. Instead, Captain Jackson pulled out a black leather wallet and opened it to reveal something that made Martinez's blood run cold. A gold police captain's badge, gleaming under the diner's fluorescent lights. "Gentlemen," Captain Jackson said in a voice that carried 32 years of command authority, "I am Captain William Jackson, Riverside Police Department, retired, and you gentlemen have just committed robbery, assault, and destruction of property." In front of multiple witnesses, the revelation hit Martinez like a physical blow. This wasn't just some helpless old man, this was a cop. And not just any cop, but a captain. Even retired, police officers retained arrest powers, and assaulting a police officer carried serious federal charges. But Martinez was too committed to his course of action to back down gracefully. "So what, old man? You're retired. You got no power here." Captain Jackson smiled grimly and reached into his other pocket to pull out his cell phone. "Son, let me tell you something about police brotherhood. When you threaten one of us, you threaten all of us. And I've got about 50 officers who would be very interested to know that some punks are threatening their old captain." He began dialing a number that Martinez recognized: 911. "This is retired Captain William Jackson, badge number 247. I'm at Murphy's Diner on Riverside Avenue, and I have 5 suspects who have just committed robbery and assault against a police officer. I need immediate backup." But what these gang members didn't know was that they had just threatened a legend whose former officers considered him family. The 911 call went out over police radio at exactly 8:47 p.m. "All units, respond code 3 to Murphy's Diner, Riverside Avenue. Retired Captain Jackson requesting immediate backup for assault on police officer." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Captain Jackson wasn't just any retired officer, he was a legend in the Riverside Police Department. During his 32-year career, He had trained hundreds of officers, mentored dozens of supervisors, and earned the respect and loyalty of every cop who had ever worked under his command. Officer Maria Santos was the first to respond over the radio. Dispatch, Unit 47 responding code 3. ETA 2 minutes. She had been one of Captain Jackson's rookies 15 years earlier, and he had personally saved her life during a domestic violence call gone wrong. Unit 23 responding, came another voice. Captain Jackson taught me everything I know about police work. Unit 15 en route. That's my old training officer. Nobody touches Captain Jackson. Within minutes, every available police unit in the district was racing toward Murphy's Diner. Officers who were off duty heard the call and responded anyway. Detectives left their cases, supervisors abandoned their paperwork, and even officers from neighboring precincts began heading toward Riverside Avenue. Back in the diner, Martinez and his crew were beginning to understand the magnitude of their mistake. Through the large front windows, they could see the first police car pulling into the parking lot, its emergency lights painting the interior of the diner in alternating red and blue. "Look, old man," Martinez said, his voice losing its earlier confidence. "Maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. No harm done, right? We were just playing around." Captain Jackson remained seated, his badge still visible on the table. "Son, you threatened a police officer, destroyed property, and terrorized innocent citizens. That's not playing around, that's serious felony behavior." Luis Herrera was already edging toward the back exit, but Captain Jackson's voice stopped him. "I wouldn't recommend trying to run, young man. By now, there are officers covering every exit from this building." As if to confirm his words, 2 officers entered through the front door, while 2 more came through the kitchen entrance. These weren't just random patrol officers, they were seasoned cops who had served under Captain Jackson and learned from his leadership. Sergeant Patricia Williams entered first, her hand resting on her service weapon. She was a 20-year veteran who had risen through the ranks under Captain Jackson's mentorship. "Captain," she said, with obvious respect and concern, "are you all right?" "I'm fine, Sergeant Williams," Captain Jackson replied, "but these gentlemen need to be arrested for assault, robbery, and terrorizing citizens." Detective Mike Rodriguez emerged from the kitchen, followed by Officer David Chen. Both men had served under Captain Jackson during their early careers and owed their success to his training and guidance. "Sir," Detective Rodriguez said, "we have the building surrounded. Nobody's going anywhere." The gang members found themselves completely outmatched and surrounded by professional law enforcement officers who were personally motivated to protect their former captain. The swagger and intimidation tactics that worked against ordinary citizens were useless against trained police officers. Martinez looked around desperately, realizing that his crew was trapped and facing serious charges. "This is harassment. We didn't do nothing." Captain Jackson reached into his jacket and pulled out a small digital recorder. "Actually, gentlemen, I recorded our entire conversation. You threatened me, demanded my money, destroyed my property, and made it clear you intended to use violence against me and other citizens." The recorder had been a habit Captain Jackson maintained even in retirement, a lesson learned from decades of dealing with criminals who would later claim they had been mistreated or that events hadn't happened. As reported, Sergeant Williams began reading Miranda rights while other officers moved to handcuff the gang members. The professional efficiency of the arrest stood in stark contrast to the chaotic intimidation tactics the gang had been using just minutes earlier. "Captain Jackson," Officer Chen said as he cuffed Carlos Rivera, "these guys picked the wrong target." Tonight, Captain Jackson finally stood from his booth, his full height and bearing, making it clear why he had commanded respect throughout his career. "Officer Chen, they didn't just pick the wrong target. They threatened the safety and security of this entire community. That's something we've never tolerated and never will." When Captain Jackson revealed his badge, the gang thought it was a joke until they heard the sirens approaching from every direction. As the gang members were led away in handcuffs, the atmosphere in Murphy's Diner began to change. The tension and fear that had filled the air just minutes earlier was replaced by relief and a sense of restored safety. The elderly couple who had been nervously asking for their check now approached Captain Jackson's table. "Officer," the man said, "thank you for standing up to those thugs. They've been terrorizing this neighborhood for weeks." The woman added, "We were afraid to come here anymore, but seeing how you handled them, maybe things can get better, Captain." Jackson accepted their thanks graciously, but he was already thinking about the larger implications of what had just occurred. This incident wasn't just about 5 gang members getting arrested, it was about the ongoing battle for the soul of the neighborhood. Detective Rodriguez approached the table as the last gang member was loaded into a patrol car. "Captain, we've been dealing with this crew for months. They're part of the Latino Kings gang, and they've been trying to establish territory in this area. What kind of charges are we looking at?" Captain Jackson asked. "Assault on a police officer, robbery, destruction of property, terroristic threatening, and will probably add gang enhancement charges," Rodriguez replied. "With their prior records, most of them are looking at serious prison time." Captain Jackson nodded, satisfied that justice would be served. But he was more concerned about preventing future incidents than just punishing these particular criminals. "Detective, I want to meet with the community leaders tomorrow. It's time to organize a real neighborhood watch program and establish regular police patrols in this area." Officer Santos, who had been taking witness statements from other diners, joined the conversation. "Captain, the community has been asking for exactly that kind of leadership. People remember when you were on active duty, they felt safe then. They can feel safe again." Captain Jackson replied firmly. "But it's going to take community involvement, not just police work." The diner's owner, Tommy Murphy, approached the table carrying a fresh cup of coffee and a new plate of meatloaf. "Captain Jackson, this meal is on the house." "Hell, every meal you eat here is on the house from now on." "That's not necessary, Tommy," Captain Jackson protested. "Yes, it is," Murphy replied firmly. "You just saved my business, and maybe my life. Those punks have been coming in here every week, intimidating my customers, threatening my staff. I was about to close down and move somewhere else." Captain Jackson accepted the fresh meal and coffee, understanding that Murphy needed to express his gratitude in a tangible way, but he was already planning how to turn this incident into a catalyst for positive change in the neighborhood. As the evening wound down, and the other customers gradually returned to their normal conversations, Captain Jackson reflected on what had transpired. He had come to Murphy's diner for a quiet meal and found himself in the middle of a confrontation that would have significant consequences for the entire community. His phone buzzed with a text message from Police Chief Martinez. "No relation to the gang member, Bill, heard about tonight. Community meeting tomorrow at AM. Time to take back the neighborhood." Captain Jackson smiled and typed back, "I'll be there." What happened next would become legendary in both police circles and on the streets, a demonstration of what happens when you threaten the wrong old man. The arrest of Martinez and his crew sent shockwaves through the local gang community. Word spread quickly that the Latino Kings had not only failed to intimidate an elderly man at Murphy's diner, but had actually assaulted a retired police captain and been arrested by an overwhelming police response. In gang culture, respect and reputation were everything. The public humiliation of being arrested by the very community they were trying to terrorize damaged the Latino Kings' credibility and deterred other gangs from attempting to move into the Riverside neighborhood. But the impact went far beyond just deterring criminal activity. The incident became a rallying point for community organization and police-citizen cooperation. The next morning, Captain Jackson met with Police Chief Martinez, community leaders, and business owners to develop a comprehensive strategy for neighborhood revitalization. The plan included increased police patrols, community watch programs, business improvement initiatives, and youth outreach programs designed to provide alternatives to gang membership. "What happened at Murphy's diner last night," Chief Martinez told the assembled group, "proves that this community still has people willing to stand up to criminal intimidation. But we can't rely on retired police captains to solve every problem. We need organized, sustained community involvement." Captain Jackson was asked to chair the new Riverside Neighborhood Safety Committee, a position he accepted with the understanding that his role would be to organize and motivate citizens rather than to personally confront criminals. "I'm 68 years old," he told the group with a smile. "I can't be getting into fights with gang members every week, but I can help this community organize itself to resist criminal activity and work with police to maintain safety." The committee's first initiative was to establish regular community meetings at Murphy's diner, turning the site of the confrontation into a symbol of citizen resistance to criminal intimidation. Within 6 months, the Riverside neighborhood had been transformed. Regular police patrols, active community watch programs, and improved business cooperation had driven most criminal activity to other areas. Property values began to rise, new businesses opened, and longtime residents who had been considering moving decided to stay. Murphy's Diner became a hub of community activity, hosting everything from neighborhood watch meetings to youth mentorship programs. Tommy Murphy installed a plaque near Captain Jackson's usual booth, in honor of Captain William Jackson and all citizens who stand up for their community. The lesson these gang members learned about respect and consequences would change how the entire neighborhood viewed both crime and justice. 6 months after the diner incident, Captain Jackson was approached by a young man he didn't immediately recognize. The encounter took place outside the community center where Captain Jackson was attending a neighborhood safety meeting. "Captain Jackson?" the young man said hesitantly. "My name is Miguel Santos. I was one of the guys who bothered you at Murphy's Diner." Captain Jackson studied the young man carefully. Miguel was one of the gang members who had been arrested that night, but he looked different now, cleaner, more respectful, obviously making an effort to present himself well. "What can I do for you, Miguel?" Captain Jackson asked cautiously. "Sir, I wanted to apologize for what we did that night, and I wanted to thank you." The thanks surprised Captain Jackson. "Thank me for what?" "For not giving up on guys like me," Miguel replied. "When we got arrested, I figured my life was over. I was looking at serious prison time, and I thought that was it for me." Miguel explained that his arrest had been a wake-up call that forced him to examine the direction his life was heading. With the help of a court-appointed counselor and a plea bargain that included community service, he had begun to turn his life around. "I've been clean for months now," Miguel continued. "I'm working at a construction company, and I'm taking night classes to get my get. But the biggest change is that I understand now what you were trying to show us that night." "What's that?" Captain Jackson asked. "That respect isn't something you take by force. It's something you earn by contributing to your community instead of tearing it down." Miguel had become involved in the very youth outreach programs that Captain Jackson's safety committee had established. He was working as a peer counselor, helping other young men avoid the gang lifestyle that had nearly destroyed his own future. "Captain Jackson, I know I can't undo what I did that night, but I wanted you to know that your example, the way you handled the situation, the way you stood up for the community, it showed me a different way to be a man." Captain Jackson was moved by Miguel's transformation, but he was also realistic about the challenges the young man still faced. "Miguel, changing your life isn't easy, and there will be people who don't believe you can do it, but if you stay committed to making positive contributions to this community, you'll find that people will give you chances to prove yourself." Miguel nodded earnestly. "Sir, I'm trying to convince some of my old crew to make the same changes. Tony Martinez got sentenced to 5 years, but Luis and Carlos are getting out next month. I want to show them that there's a better way." Captain Jackson considered this information carefully. The idea of former gang members becoming community advocates was appealing, but it would require careful management to ensure their transformation was genuine and sustainable. "Miguel, if you're serious about helping other young men avoid gang life, I'd like you to consider working with our youth mentorship program. But understand, this isn't about second chances. This is about earning trust through consistent positive actions." Over the following year, Miguel Santos became one of the most effective youth counselors in the Riverside neighborhood. His first-hand experience with gang life gave him credibility with at-risk youth, while his genuine commitment to community improvement earned him respect from residents and business owners. The transformation of Miguel and several other former gang members became a powerful symbol of the neighborhood's revitalization. It demonstrated that community-based approaches to crime prevention could address root causes rather than just responding to symptoms. Captain Jackson's confrontation with gang members at Murphy's Diner had lasted less than 30 minutes, but its impact continued to ripple through the community years later. The incident had shown that standing up to criminal intimidation was possible, that police and citizens could work together effectively, and that even people who had made serious mistakes could find paths to redemption. Most importantly, it had reminded everyone involved that communities are worth fighting for, and that sometimes the most powerful weapon against crime is the simple courage to say no when criminal behavior tries to establish itself in your neighborhood. The plaque at Murphy's Diner became more than just a memorial to one incident. It became a reminder that ordinary citizens, working together with law enforcement, could create the kind of communities where families could feel safe, businesses could prosper, and young people could find positive paths forward. And every Tuesday night, Captain Jackson still sat in his corner booth, eating meatloaf and keeping watch over the neighborhood he had spent his life protecting. But now, instead of sitting alone, He was often joined by community leaders, young mentors like Miguel Santos, and citizens who understood that maintaining a safe community was everyone's responsibility. The gang members who had thought they could intimidate one elderly man had inadvertently sparked a community revival that transformed an entire neighborhood. It was a lesson in the power of standing up for what's right, the importance of police-community cooperation, and the possibility of redemption for those willing to choose a better path. Where are you watching this video from? Don't forget to leave a comment with your city. Remember, every comment is a voice, and every voice is a change. What about you? Have you ever encountered such an event or situation? Write a comment. We want to hear your story.